All right. So next we have a guy that a lot of people like. I'm not too high on,
Hmm.
but it is Cody Williams from Colorado, brother of Jalen Williams. That's J Will, not J, or J Dub, not J Will.
You get it
Uh,
right.
I know, right? Got to get it right, or they'll come find me. But his measurements outside of his weight are actually fantastic. At least to me, he's 6'6.5", with a standing reach of 8'7", wingspan 7'1". That was one where I knew
Hmm.
it would be. I knew he would have a good wingspan. 7'1" was not what I was expecting, but hey, I'll take it. But then the weight, he's 178, which it I looked far and wide to find a player that kind of had his build, but with that weight, and I ended up with Will Barton. So I mean, it's just combine measurements, but and Will Barton was used, kind of to be like this 3-and-D guy for pretty good team. So it depends on how you want to look at it, but with his game, with Cody Williams, I really like his ability in transition. I think he is a
Hmm.
guy that he runs the floor well. He's not going to be the guy similar to Castle. He's not going to be the guy to get the tip, get the steal, and then go on break. But he's really good at kind of passing in transition. He's good at kind of getting open and running the lane in transition and finishing at the rim. I wouldn't necessarily say he's athletic, but he has a way of getting to the rim that it's difficult to defend. I think it's his long strides that really help him get to the rim, and of course
Hmm.
his wingspan. I think it helps him finish over defenders. But I mean, his 3-point shooting. I know a lot of people are going to look at that. It's just it's extremely low. I think he only took 41 attempts all season. Very rarely did. I mean, all the 3-pointers were kind of the same, where it was just he had to be almost wide open, or the defense had to completely almost sag off of him for him to shoot. So that was kind of, as we talked about with Cat, as we mentioned, not really anyone that we talked about today is really that good of a shooter. But even I would say even more so than Castle, even though he ended up taking more threes, or he ended up, converting at a higher rate. He seemed more hesitant to me than Castle did at times. And Castle had other ways of making up for it. Unfortunately, Cody Williams to me does not. I do. He's the definition of an NBA level wing when you think about his composition. It's just the weight and then some of his skill set. You just kind of worry. And then this may only, I mean, some teams may not care about it because the injuries were little, but as a Hornets fan, we've seen too many injuries too many times, and he's just had a bunch of them. Well, he had three, but it was wrist, ankle, and then face. The face one, of course, that's not his fault. I think he got elbowed like first day of practice at Colorado. Can't do nothing about that. But other than that, he's just wrist, ankle, extremity, like those kind of things kind of worry me because those are things that can linger, as we've seen with LaMelo. And considering his small frame, as far as his weight, it makes me even a little more concerned. But skill set wise, and when you look at what NBA level wings are doing now and what he can do, I see it. I see why people I don't. Some people had him at like 2 early into the season. I don't see that, but I do see why some people rate him highly because he does everything you would want your NBA wing to do. It's just it may not be as polished and as poised as you would want it to be. He can do it, but he's just a very hesitant player. Now, granted, he had I forget their point guard's name,
KJ Simpson, who
AJ
played
Simpson.
has had a really nice showing at the combine
Yeah, he's been really
this week
good,
too.
and then Tristan De La Silva as well is a good player. So he kind of deferred to them. So my biggest thing about him, without going too deep, as of right now, is that sometimes you look at you watch him on tape, watch a full game of him, and you kind of just wonder where he's at. He doesn't really pop out on tape. He's a smart defender, but I'm just not too high on him. But I see why people are high on him as far as he has everything that it takes.
Yeah,
He's well rounded.
the length is like just undeniable, right? I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
7'1" wingspan, that plus like a 5-star pedigree is like, like and a pedigree that also includes like a brother that's like a burgeoning, future all-star in
It
the
was very
NBA.
similar when he was in
Like
college as well.
like that alone is enough to make like certain front offices like light up, right? And like get
Mhm.
really, really, really intrigued. I think the team context is like interesting because one, this Colorado team, they were one of my favorite teams to watch in the country this season. It's like a
Mhm.
very fun offensive team because they had like a very, very competent point guard in KJ Simpson. You got Tristan Da Silva, who's can really shoot at like a hybrid forward spot. You got Eddie Lampkin, who is basically like the Pac-12's DJ Burns.
He really was.
Javon Hadley's a really nice player that's going to end up transferring to Louisville. That had a really nice season for them. They just had they had size at a lot of positions with the exception of maybe Simpson at point guard. They had skill. Like there's a couple future pros on this team. Tad Boyle's a really good coach. Like they were just like a well organized and like very competent team. It's also why like when they didn't have Williams this season, like they just kept rolling. Like
yeah, it wasn't like
it's kind of amazing how good, like, if he was he's projected, comes into the season as a projected top 10, lottery pick, probably could still end up in there. And they just kept it rolling when he wasn't even playing. And then often there were games this season, if you watch them, like, they weren't always closing games with him this season as well. And according to CBB Analytics, Colorado without Cody Williams on the floor this season, still very good on both sides of the court. 114 points per 100 possessions on offense, defense of just under 105 points per 100 possessions. They were plus 130 points in 814 minutes without Cody Williams this year. So like they kind of just kept it rolling. And he ended up carving out like an okay role for them, 20% usage rate, not high, but not like, appallingly low. But it's interesting because it's an offense that, again, had a primary guy with Simpson. At times, Williams kind of like would sort of like operate as like a backup one for them, which is like was kind of a weird usage for him, just given like confidence, limitations with the handle, that type of stuff. But ultimately, like I'm like a little intrigued by Williams, even if I come out like lower on him than maybe some do. Far as going forward role, a wing with secondary, ancillary playmaking skills, can move as a cutter and can really make plays in transition, which you touched on, a good defensive outcome, versatile, switchy across different positions, gets stronger so he can guard more positions, and a guy that can use that wingspan and his willingness to be help defender to put out fires all over the court as like help defender, super long. And he's one of those guys, like his ability to contest shots to me always struck me as something that was like really impressive, just like in terms of how far he's able to extend and bother jump shooters on a closeout, even if it's, not him on like a running, dead straight line, sprint, rotating around closeout, but just sort of like end of the clock, guys putting up a dribble jumper, he's in front, he's just, leaping out to contest. He can just really close down ground and space. And like, if you study this kind of stuff, man, it is amazing how the value of like a good contest and like what that matters. Like, we talk all the time about how if you put NBA shooters in a gym, like they'll just make a million straight shots, and the only things that cause them to miss are like game situation pressure and like the type of closeouts you're getting. So that is, if I were covering a team or a fan of a team that ended up, landing Williams, that's something I would like really kind of hang my hat on. Like, I think this guy has the chance to like really impact a defense in ways that don't even sort of show up even in like an advanced type of box score, but athletically more of a glider, long strides, fluid hips, smooth, fluid lateral movements, can be an explosive leaper, but like needs a runway. I like the way like his feel shows up from time to time, the ability to work as a cutter, fill the lane in transition. He relocates with a purpose. And I think because of that, he can kind of help build the advantage chain by being a clever off-ball mover, a clever passer. Like I'd stop maybe short of calling him like a full-on connector, but just like he knows how to like play offense,
He's a smart player. He's a very, very smart player. And playing with Colorado, as you mentioned, he had to be. Because you can't be, not knowing what you're doing when you have two guys in Tristan Silva and KJ Simpson and just not know what you're doing.
Yep, exactly. And again, a team that also played plenty of 5-out. So, Eddie Lampkin's going to handle the ball, on 5-out delay sets or at the elbow, plenty too. So like, you kind of had to know how to like fit into like a system, which again, I think that's something interesting for a guy like Williams. I don't think he's like a plug and play guy, but the fact that he kind of like knows how to like, work and pick his spots in terms of involvement in the half court is interesting. I think the handle is probably his most glaring issue, right?
Yeah.
He's just limited in terms of it. His first step is like okay. I don't think it's terrible, but probably decent at best. I'm just not sure there's a lot of outcomes where he has like a pathway to becoming a guy that creates advantages for you because of the handle. He can
Yeah.
struggle against pressure that limits his overall like passing scope when on the basketball. It looks better in transition, right? Where he's got space and he's using his stride length to like chew up space and get downhill. But like versus pressure in the half court, it can look it can look a little rough. So yeah, any other thoughts on Williams from an offensive standpoint?
No, offensively, I like I said, I don't really like his ability to create for himself. I don't see it there. Of course, we just mentioned he had two just incredible players playing along with him. So, did he really get a chance to show it? Maybe not as much as you would like him to, but also when you did see it, it just didn't feel. I wouldn't say it didn't feel good because that's one thing I will say. He watching him when you watch like just positive plays, so mainly highlight, he looks and feels really good. It's like there's no way this guy is not an NBA player. But then you kind of when you watch the full games, that's when you kind of like, he's disappearing here and there. And as you mentioned, they kind of played well without him. He missed 13 games this year. They still went 26-11. So it's not like he had this. He had an impact. Of course, you're the coach. You want him there, but is it changing the game? I don't really think so. Not in the ways you would want to, at least. And then really, him coming into the season with an injury, him in the middle of the season with an injury, him ending the season with an injury, you wonder, did you ever get to see the real him? That's just kind of my concern. But his game overall, when I look at it, I can see where he can be a successful player. At 6, I think is the part where if I'm a team that I'm trying to think of a team off the top of my head, but if I'm a team that I got a bad team's pick from a previous trade in previous years, I would take a flyer on him. A perfect guy to come off the bench. We're already a pretty successful team. For where the Hornets are, I just don't see it. If this is their guy, he would be on probably my second tier of people who I would want the Hornets to get. But I would definitely need them to trade back. I would definitely need them to trade back.
Agreed. And you sort of touched on the shot a little bit. I mean, he shot 41% from deep this year, but on only 41, attempts, 17 to 41. According to Synergy, 43.
I think he was like ice cold from the right hand side. Like he just didn't really operate that well up there. Yeah, so he struggled.
Off the catch, shot 43% on threes, but only 16 of 37 attempts, and took only, according to Synergy again, took only 4 off dribble 3-point jumpers this season. He was 1 of 4 on those looks. The finishing, can use his length, and when he's in a straight line, can like be kind of an awesome grab and go finisher. And he finished this season with 15 dunks. And according to Bartorvik, he shot 74% at the rim. That's including half court and transition. I think he's got a decent touch in certain areas of the floor, including some of these like live ball situations. But again, struggles to finish through contact. More of a half court concern, mind you, for Williams, but just something to keep in line. Like if he could get stronger, if he could improve the handle, then it'd be interesting to see a guy with this kind of length and this kind of like defensive upside, like if he could be a creator for you. But those are right now, those feel like 2 pretty big ifs, and there's just some other guys I would have in the queue ahead of him. So I like Williams as a prospect. I'm not like out on him, but I agree with you, Darian. Like 6 is a little too rich for me.
And I think to your point, I think you mentioned this earlier, his brother. Because I would like to say that remembering watching his brother at Santa Clara, I didn't have all the same, positives and negatives about him, but their games were somewhat kind of similar, even though I felt like Jalen was a little more, he could create a little more. I think people are trying to project that onto his brother, on Cody. They're seeing how Jalen turned out, saw from where he started to where he is now, and kind of are projecting that on Cody. And I don't think we've seen it. At least with Jalen, we saw him try. It's similar to what we were saying about Ron Holland earlier, that we've seen him do a lot of different things. So once it's just a matter of him kind of perfecting it.
Mhm.
Cody's a little different. There's a lot of stuff we have not seen him do, so I just can't use his brother as an excuse to say, well, I think he can do it because they're same in size and they're related.
Yeah, yeah.
I just can't afford to do it. There are, like you said, there's some other guys that we've seen that way more efficient, have done way more. Yeah, so